This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums. The African drums are sounding.
Hello, good night Guyana. Today is May 17th, and you know, as my aunt likes to say, yesterday was an auspicious day. I like to say today is also an auspicious day. Welcome to another edition of African Drums, a presentation of the Coffee 250 Committee. Last week we promised you that today we'll be meeting and celebrating, and today we are meeting and celebrating. I'm filling in for LC Harry on this episode of African Drums. Tonight we're focusing again our conversation on the elections, and specifically African Guyanese and the elections of 2015. Tonight I'm joined in studio by, to my far left, Ms. Comica Johnson of the Coffee 250 Committee, Mr. David Hinds, no stranger to you and to the program, and Ms. Joan Cambridge, also of the Coffee 250 Committee. I'm your host, Mr. Norwell Hinds, and tonight again our topic is African Guyanese and the elections of 2015. I want to start off the program first of all by congratulating the Partnership for National Unity plus the Alliance for Change on their victory at the 2015 polls. I think that a lot of work went into it from our communities. Coffee 250 Committee as an organization put a lot of work into it as well, in terms of whistle stop meetings, organizing communities, voter education and stuff like that. This victory therefore is obviously not just a victory for the political party, it's a victory for all of Guyana, and it's a victory particularly for African Guyanese people. I want us to speak right from the onset. What do you think essentially was the contribution of African Guyanese communities to this election of 2015? I'll start with you, Dr. Hinds.
Well, I think for the first contribution of African Guyanese was answering the call that was thrown out by the coalition to put an end to the madness that this country had descended. The PPP had descended this country into that mad situation, and African Guyanese joined with other ethnic groups in answering that call to say enough is enough and it is time. And I think they answered that call in multiple ways. First of all, they answered that call by embracing it from the onset. Secondly, they answered it at the organizational level. African organizations such as Coffee 250 were integrally involved in organizing independently of the parties, doing organizational work. And then the masses of people, in terms of their own participation in a process that they have historically been suspicious of. That is, they felt that the electoral process could not lead to the empowerment of the African community again. And for them to embrace it and participate in it, I think it was a revolutionary act on their part. So embracing and participating in the process, registering to vote, making sure that they got their particulars, and then going out to vote, I think was very important. And the going out to vote was very important because we're talking about demographics even within the African Guyanese community that would not normally go out and vote. We're talking about young people, especially young black men, who, you know, were and are the most abused section of the population, and so have had very little confidence in the process. But they were in the forefront. In fact, what initial numbers are showing is that they may have outvoted other sections of the African Guyanese community. So we saw the African Guyanese community collectively embracing participation in the process. And then thirdly, I think the self-activity of the people. Alright? So that on election day, the days leading up to election, you saw people independent of the party machineries in the villages and the communities organizing to get people to the polls, organizing to make sure that everything is in place. And I saw it with my very eyes as I went through the villages and saw how people independently, what Walter Rodney called self-organization, and we in Coffee 250 talk about self-reliance and so forth. And we saw that at play in the African-Guyanese community. And then when the elections were over, we saw those people defending the integrity of the process. So when you saw PPP members going into the polling stations, the African Guyanese community came out and defended. I saw it at Paradise, I saw it at St. Sidwell, I saw it in South, I saw it all over, I saw it at Buxton, I saw it all over, people defending those ballot boxes. And then when the elections were over and people were waiting anxiously for the results, and we kept having all these delaying tactics and so forth, and many people were saying, you know, they're provoking the black community. We saw a high level of tolerance, a high level of patience on the part of African Guyanese people. And I think what that did is that it nailed this lie that African Guyanese people are emotionally and instinctively given to violence whenever they get vexed. No, people they vex bad, that they weren't releasing the thing, but they didn't channel that vexation into this thing of going out there and behaving badly. They were patient. In fact, I was going into communities where people were telling me, Dr. Hinds, keep you cool, all right? So I didn't have to tell them to keep their cool. They were telling us to keep our cool. And I think finally, when the results were announced and Mr. Granger was sworn in yesterday, we saw people taken to the streets in Georgetown and all over the place and really embracing this new leader, really giving their seal of approval to a change and saying, we are part of this change. So I would say that all Guyanese played an important role in this moment. But as we're speaking of African Guyanese, I would say African Guyanese played a pivotal role. And I don't want to hear people to think that I'm talking about African Guyanese supremacy and they played a more important role. I'm saying, given where African Guyanese were located, given the fact that they were the ones who perceived themselves as outside of the halls of power, they had much more of an incentive to push down the door, to push down that door of domination. And they came through with flying colors, along with the other ethnic groups, our Amerindian brothers and sisters, some East Indian brothers and sisters, and Portuguese and Chinese and so on, who supported the coalition. African Guyanese joined with them in bringing about liberation to this country. And this indeed is a point of liberation.
Thanks very much, David. I think that was quite a mouthful.
And
it really covered a lot of areas.
It was.
In fact, you know, but I want us to get a little bit more specific. And let us talk, for example, in Region 3. Because we saw in Region 3, for example, tremendous voter turnout. And we saw in Region 3 also a Partnership for National Unity plus AFC getting 50% of the PPP's vote, which had not happened in previous elections. That was very tremendous. Comica, you were the coordinator for Coffee 250 on that side. Tell us specifically about some of the organizing work that you saw taking place, specifically about Coffee 250 committee, but also you can expand to church groups that you know of that did work, because I know a lot of church groups did work, and you can talk about other civil society and social groups in that area.
Well, good evening, Norwell, and thank you for having me on the show, and good evening to your viewers as well. I would like to say that I saw a lot of camaraderie during this leading up to the elections. On the west side, I saw people organizing themselves in the community. I saw older folks going door to door and doing voter education with young people. I heard about churches having special services, all-night prayers, and so on. In my travels to different communities, I felt a lot of camaraderie, especially from women, and I want to touch on this because I was at a particular polling station, and I was there from about 4:30, let's say about 4:30, and The women were there, Norwell, from then on until about after 2 when I left that polling station. The women stayed. They didn't leave. They were with their babies, and when it got too late, they took their children at home. But I want to bring out this point to show the strength of women that really helped us to win this election, and a lot of camaraderie. Yeah, that's what I saw, camaraderie and strength.
Yeah, when you said the west side, I thought you were about to say the best side.
It is the best side.
Because that's what the youngsters say in the street, west side, the best side.
Yeah.
And you know, indeed there was a lot of, I felt too, a sense of, there was urgency in the spirit almost.
Yes.
It's as if people felt this sense of urgency, and there was this sort of,
now or never.
You seem to understand what was happening. So I want to bring you in directly, Ms. Cambridge.
Yeah.
And we were talking here about, of course, the participation of African-Guyanese people.
Yeah.
We saw in Region 10, for example, the APNU plus AFC increased their margin by 4,000 votes average.
Right.
We saw in Region 4, for example, that the margin 69,000 to 113,000 votes. These were tremendous victories. What do you say about the spirit of the African person involved in that process, and how we won that election, this election?
I think it says a lot to the spirit, and we have always been criticizing the black community generally for not having a sense of spirituality, of their spirituality, as the Indians have. You know, the Indians know who they are, and this knowledge of self is based in their spirituality, I think. Indians don't balk at the idea of being called an Indian, but many African Guyanese say, don't call me an African, you know, and stuff like that. But there's something about, to me, as Comica was saying, the services and so on, people really went out there and prayed for this thing to happen. And the poet, I think it was Tennyson who said, more things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of. Those people in the churches and everywhere prayed for this thing to happen. And, you know, most of the churches are filled with black people. They prayed like hell. And then when they won, they went out there giving thanks. And they were going through the streets, you know, in procession saying, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. Now, it seems to me that what we have to do is get them to understand that when they say thank you, Jesus, they're praying to an ancestor. The Bible tells them so. They can check the Bible. I'm not a student of the Bible, so I won't know exactly where it says that Jesus had woolly hair and skin like burnt, what was it? You know, I know, dark skin, you know. So what they have to do now is understand that when they say in the name of Jesus, they're saying in the name of an ancestor, you know. We have to get our people to understand that this Jesus, they must claim Jesus as their own, you know. Jesus is out there in the spirit world with all their other ancestors who also shed their blood for them. Jesus is one of these people. And I saw that, you know, it came home forcibly to me that this is what we must do, that this lie of a Jesus that looks white, even though the Bible tells a different story. And we have these pictures. I saw a man outside of the border post office selling these little pictures, you know, and he had some pictures of the Last Supper. So I said, don't you have any pictures of a black Jesus, you know, in the Last Supper? He says, no, I had one and sell it. And he was really rough with me. So I looked at him and I said, well, come on, man. He says, lady, I just sell what people just buy. So this idea is rejected, although it's clearly stated in the Bible. So when I saw this energy let loose in the street, this happiness at having prayed for this thing to happen, and it happened, they won. And they went out there, they supported it. Now they must claim that power of Jesus as their own, because it's their image. When they look in the mirror, they must see Jesus that helped them to win this election. This is where I see the spirituality of our people, you know, would play a great part in self-esteem, in just feeling that they have. I drove home on the day that day before yesterday with a taxi driver, and he did not stop talking. He was so happy, and he was saying, you know what it is, Mods, for you to feel like if you're nothing, like people just walking on you, you ain't got nowhere to go, you don't have any help to get, nobody don't like you. You know where it is? You know where it is, Mod? I say, yes, I know. He says, but Mods, I pray, and I said, thank you, Jesus. You know.
I wanna go to something else too, because you raised a point as well. Both of you are Comica, and David is in Comica, Miss Cambridge as well as David. A lot of things have been said of the African person in this society. The African people don't have spirituality. You know, you just mentioned that. Not true. We do.
Yes.
We don't necessarily call it what we used to call it, but we have it. It's deep, and sometimes we call upon it, and we call upon it this time. But another thing that tends to be said about the African person is that, hey, you know, them African people violent bad, you know. You can't have this election and hold back results, and these people next day they gonna burn up the streets, and they gonna burn down buildings, and there was, you know, I heard even Mr. Jagdio saying that people were celebrating in the streets with gunfire. Crazy. It was crazy in a lie. Let's talk a little bit about that, about the stereotypes attached to the African person as it relates to elections, but also about the demonstration of the true African values in this election, especially in relation to what was considered by all international observers a very intense process out of GCOM. Days and days of delays, and we have a time and then another time and so on. David, I'm going to put it out to you first. What can we say about the African response?
Look, Norwell, African people went through 400 years of enslavement. No other ethnic group has gone through that. I mean, you're talking about 400 years of your humanity being taken away from you. And in that process, you have to develop certain skills. You know, it is why African people, black people, have contributed so much to human civilization, because we are constantly having to fight for our own humanity. And we see it here in Guyana. People say you're inhuman, you're a brute, you're violent, you're this and so on. And so we are constantly having to prove to the world that we are not. Alright? But here is the thing. Alright? It is, if any ethnic group knows how to fight oppression, it's black people. Right? You know, because we've been so constantly oppressed that I think that we have developed a particular skill. And you know, there's sometimes we lose our way. Now, which individual doesn't lose his or her way? Which community doesn't lose its way? Which ethnic group doesn't lose its way? And sometimes we have lost our way. Part of the time under the PPP, we became complacent. We allow ourselves to be swayed by the PPP. We allow ourselves to be bribed by the PPP. We allow ourselves to lose that self-esteem that you talk about, Joan. But what all of that did is that it allowed us to begin a quiet conversation among our people. Coffee 250 came into being as a result of that. We came into being to deal with that thing, to begin to have that conversation. And we have been having that conversation. We've had two very important State of African Guyanese, where we've started that conversation. We've gone into communities and talked to people about what it means to be black and to be Guyanese, what it means to be black and proud, what it means to be black and human, what it means to be black and authentically, what it means to be black and beautiful. And our work has paid off, right? Because we've had that conversation. And those of us who move around and talk to people, people give you feedback. as I was mentioning that before we started the program, I walked through the crowd yesterday in front of the Parliament buildings, and people called out to me, and I tried to stop to talk to as many people as I could in the time that I was there, and I want to apologize for those who I didn't get to talk to. But almost to a person, they whispered in my ears, most of them, but some of them very loudly said, "Dr. Hinds, they will always try to deny the role that we black people played in this process. And if anybody is going to say it, we want you to say it. To let the world know that black people contributed to this change that I come." And I promise them that at the first opportunity I get, I will say it. And the opportunity has come now for me to say that African Guyanese contributed equally to this process, and we should be proud of ourselves that once again, faced with extreme tyranny, we have led Guyana to overcome it. Our story is not just about being oppressed. Our story as black people has always been a story of overcoming, emancipation, independence, 1763, 1823. There are stories about degradation,
even
but
1992.
1992 and now 2015. Here is our story of overcoming. And once again we are showing the world that we are people too. We are human beings too, and that we have spirituality too. We have minds too, right? What Bob Marley said, in every man's chest beats a heart, they beats a heart, right? We have a heart too, right? And we feel too. And so therefore, you know, we have to be so proud of ourselves. We have to be so proud of ourselves. And I'm not saying this as a statement of superiority, but as a statement of saying that we are part of the Guyana camaraderie. And as part of the Guyana camaraderie, we have delivered and moving forward.
Oh yeah, that's beautifully said. And you know, I want to pull out to the next topic actually, because the next thing I was going to ask about, it seems almost answered now. What does this mean for Guyana? What does Guyanese-ness mean now, when we have seen this demonstration? The APNU plus AFC called it their unity train. They call themselves a unity campaign. We saw the exhibition of people of all ethnicities working together, campaigning together, celebrating together. In this new dispensation, what can we say of Guyanese-ness? How can we then begin to redefine Guyanese-ness in this new society? I'll start with you, Ms. Cambridge.
Well, I think proceeding from the fact that African Guyanese played such a significant role in the outcome of the elections, and the pride that they must take from that, they have to go forward with that in defining and shaping their Guyanese identity. I disagree with the people who say that we must don't worry with our differences and put aside differences. We are different. We are of different cultures, we are of different ethnicities, and that is what makes the Guyanese mosaic, the whole Guyanese, you know, pattern so very interesting. It's colorful. It's made up of different groups and different cultures. African Guyanese have got to go forward with this pride and this energy that came out of the elections, with the determination to stamp their identity on the Guyanese culture. They have to stamp their identity. They have to say, I am African Guyanese. As I always say, the Indians don't balk at being called Indian. But many African Guyanese say, I'm not an African, and so on. We have to take our history from its origin right back to where we are here, bring it forward to where we are here, and go forward, you know. We are aiming now for that mountaintop where we can see distances in every direction. You know, our past, We're standing here in our present history, which is contemporary history, and we're moving forward. And we have got to define ourselves and decide who we are, and stand up and hold our heads up and say proudly, I am Guyanese, I'm African Guyanese, because this is what was handed down by my ancestors, and I proceed in that direction. Spiritually, you know, culturally, everything. We have got to define ourselves, just as the Indians must define themselves, and they have been doing that. You know, they will not be lost in this new dispensation. They will just continue a momentum that they have already established. The Amerindians, you know, are certainly doing that. You know, the Portuguese, the Chinese, all the, you know, the multi-cultures that make up Guyana. We have got to make that clearly, or separate identities clearly defined in the overall tapestry that's Guyana. You know, that's what I feel.
I think that's you know, that's a strong case, and I do agree that that is largely where we see the new society going. I think that inevitably there is some cultural exchange that takes place once you live in the same space. You live in the same space, and I think once you come to that space from a position of strength, you know, and I know that this is the words that I know David Hinds would use, you know, you come to that space with your group, but from a position of strength, then you can assert yourself in that space, in that place.
In the new dispensation, you have the opportunity to do it, because nobody will stand in your way as you try to define your meaning.
But out of that process, though, emerges an identity, a patrimony that is shared by everyone, that we can call a Guyanese society, you know, that seems to reflect everyone, but there's not everyone. That is not
just one group.
You understand? But it is identifiable as belonging to everyone. But I want to talk a little bit, Comica, about the youth input into this process. How do you see then this new society, the new sense of Guyanese-ness among young people? Young people are an important part of this process, and how do you see that in this new dispensation?
I think in this new dispensation, young people will become more involved in government, in seeing, in ensuring that this government does what they say that they'll do. Young people were a large percentage of the voting population. And I think moving forward, when you go into the communities, you see where there is need, and you hear the comments that they make, what they want to see moving forward. And I think they have a vision of where they want to see Guyana. So I think moving forward, they like to see a level playing field, because that is not always so. I remember being in Dartmouth, and this young man was giving us his experience. He talked about applying, when you go to apply for jobs, because Dartmouth is an African community, they would oftentimes have to put the address of another community in order to get even get to the interview process. Once you're from Dartmouth, you're being singled out, you're being marginalized. And from his discourse, I got the distinct impression that that has affected his mind. You know, he spoke so, I wouldn't say as though he's depressed, but you could tell that he is affected. So moving forward, I think this playing field would be leveled, because we have a government of national unity. And so the youth involvement should be more significant, because they realize what's at stake.
There's some important points there, but it's not, even as you're speaking, something is coming to my mind. You know, I remember when Barack Obama came into office, and there was the world of expectation, you know, with Barack Obama. And I remember some of the commentators saying, oh my, you know, he's only an American president, and America is America, you know, how much can he achieve? But there's an important point that is there in what you say, and I'm going to point this question to Dr. Hinds, which is the question of justice. Because I think what you're getting to is that the level playing field is not only because we have a unity government, but because we have a government that has promised justice. And therefore, in this new society, and I say that almost in a philosophical, esoteric sense, this new society that we've created has the promise of justice, and therefore is that a reasonable expectation? And what, if that is a reasonable expectation, Dr. Hinds, what can we see as some of those pointed issues of justice that we have to pursue as an African community?
Yes, it is a reasonable expectation. Governments, by and large, have the capacity to create the conditions to facilitate things. And I think we have to hold this government to that. It has promised that. And my own sense or my own knowledge of the people who were involved in the leadership is that they are sincere enough in order to do that. Having come out of the unjust society that we've just come out of, anything that succeeds that can only move towards more justice. And as we're speaking about justice, I mean, one of the worrying things, for example, is the relationship between the black community and the police force, the justice system. You know, where our young people have grown up in the last 23 years to believe that the police was there to kill them. Right? It was not there to protect them. It was not there to protect the strong, the weak against the strong, but to impose the will of the strong against the weak. And so to be pivotal, one of the first things this government will have to do is to really deal with the question of the police force and changing the culture of the police force to recognize that black people are human beings and so forth. And to once again, because the police force is made up of primarily black people, the majority of people in the police force are black people, but they are black people who have been socialized within the framework of law and order to have very little respect for black life. And so therefore, when black people talk about justice, that's one of the first things that jump out. The economic justice is another thing that jumps out. That you have the right to work because you have the right to live. And if you have a right to life, it means you have the right to work so that you can live and so forth. So those issues of the right to life, the right to live in peace, the right to expect the government and the state to defend you and not to feel that its first job is to kill you. Those are not unreasonable expectations to have of this government. Now, Norwell, I want to say something. If you look at the election results, you will see that Guyana is as polarized ethnically as it has ever been. In fact, this election is probably the most polarized election. I mean, it's 50.2 to 49 point something. I mean, you couldn't get closer than that. And if you look at the numbers, you will see the two ethnic groups voted differently. But here is the story. Here is the story. To lead a multi-ethnic movement, to lead a movement of national unity, you don't necessarily need all the races to vote for one party. Right? What you need is for one section of the population to have that, to arrive at that point where it is willing to say, I am going to vote for a government not of my own race, but for a government of national unity. The people who voted for the coalition voted for 6 parties. They voted for national unity. Now, they may have voted en bloc, but they voted on issues. When you talk to the supporters of the coalition, who were mainly Afro-Guyanese, but they were also East Indians and Amerindians and so, they were talking about corruption, government corruption. That's an issue. They were talking about employment, right? That's an issue, right? They're talking about police, the police and the justice system. That's an issue. And so therefore, to say that because people at the group vote for one party, they vote race, is not necessarily true. You can vote for all ethnic people vote for a particular party, but you vote for that party based on issues. And in this case, we were voting not for a party. We were voting for a coalition of parties whose main plank was that they want to move the country towards a national unity. And so black people voted for national unity. And look, one of the things that we have not talked about is the enormous political manners, I will call it, that black people exhibited in this thing.
Yes.
They treated Moses Nagamutu and the other Indian leaders with manners, right? They didn't treat them as a token Indian. They treated them as comrades, as brothers in arms, as leader, our leader, okay? And that's political manners, right? You know, which is something that you don't always see in political campaigns, right? And that is very significant because it goes to the humanity. That it says that if you respect your own humanity, you respect the humanity of the other ethnic group. Now, here is the story. The elections are over. We have won. Our people have celebrated. But you go out there, Indian people are going about their business as if nothing has happened. No blood is running in the streets. Indian people are not running and hiding and not coming to the road. I walked to Overrun last night. Indian people were partying as they do every night. This is remarkable because we have had this sea change, and yet the group that voted for the party that lost felt confident enough to walk the streets without fearing that they would be massacred. I think that's a leap in our political process. Here's the other thing. Indians were told, your bloods will run in the Demerara River. They're going to come kick down your doors. It would have been easy for Indian people, when they heard that the PPP lost, to take out their guns and to say, we are going to shoot first before you all come and take. And they didn't do that. Yeah. So although the people voted along ethnic lines, they have not behaved in any kind of ethnically, there was no ethnic Armageddon. They're not behaving as though we're presidents of that. So I think there is something that has begun to happen in this society, right, that can only augur well for national peace and national wholeness and national reconciliation in this country. That one ethnic group could vote one way and its coalition wins, and the other ethnic group, despite the warnings of doom from their leaders, can feel confident to walk the night, not just the day, to walk the nights as if we are in a normal society. Something is happening in this society that we, the pundits, have not yet put our fingers on. I want to give notice that we are in the presence of something new, and I want to congratulate the Afro-Guyanese for helping us to reach this point.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
it's
winds of change.
The natural mystic.
Natural mystic,
mystic
blowing
is blowing.
in the air.
Yes.
The
natural mystic is blowing in the air.
Yes. Oh wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we've already gone into discussing some of the specific expectations that we can have in this new era. I want us to get a little bit more into it, talking about, for example, Coffee 250 committee has focused a lot on the issue of land and the use of land. Self-reliance has been the message. Organizing our communities for especially taking ownership and control of land as one issue, for example. How do you see, what expectations do you have in relation to your mission as an organization, Coffee 250 Committee, in response to this new dispensation? I'm going to start with you, Comica, especially in Region 3. What do you see as some of the things that that's going to happen positively?
I think moving forward, well, Coffee 250 is a consciousness-raising organization, and so I think we're going to start having a lot of discussions, a lot of national discussions on land issues. Now, our new Prime Minister has promised, and I'm very proud to say that has promised that he's going to undo the wrongs that has been done by the previous administration when it comes to ancestral lands. And I think he is, from what I've seen so far, he appears to be a man of his word. So I think moving forward as Coffee 250, we'll have a national discussion on land issues. Most likely in the next couple of weeks. I don't think we should go into relaxed mode because the elections is over. But now the work has to begin. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be going to different communities on the west side. So basically that's it. Conversations, consciousness raising in the next couple of weeks.
Any other issues?
Go ahead, Joan.
No, frankly, I think that what Coffee 250 is planning to do, and should certainly be doing, is to let people understand that you don't have anybody to blame now for your condition. And you have to get ready for what you expect to happen. You have to be ready to receive it, to receive the opportunity. I'd say why I say this. A young man that I tried to help recently, I told him, you know, after, you know, we had a little parting of ways, and I said, you missed a great opportunity, you know, and we talked a little longer, and then he came back and said, what opportunity did I miss, you know? He had no idea that he was being, you know, kind of mentored, you know, and helped. You know, he had no idea that that was an opportunity. We have got to understand the meaning of opportunity and be prepared to grasp it, having recognized it. So this is our opportunity now to gather ourselves together in groups, in cooperative groups. That's why I was happy to see the cooperative song being sung there, you know, where we understand that the individualism that exists in our communities, you know, will not work anymore. We have got to learn to gather ourselves into groups, conceive of projects, so, and get those projects very much fleshed out, you know, and with our vision, seeing ourselves operating within these projects in our
especially,
future.
I suppose you would say too, especially the creative industry.
Yeah, the creative industry, yes. And then we take these projects before the people that we've just put in power, because now, you know, I want to tell, with my congratulations, go my reminders to the partnership, the Unity Coalition, that they are our servants, okay?
Yes,
they are our servants, you know, and we are now going to be saying to them, here, this is what we have, you help this to happen. But we cannot sit down there and wait and expect them to do things for us. They have to know what we want to be done, you know. So this is what I feel Coffee 250 can play a great role in that, in going through the communities and getting people prepared to grasp the opportunities that will be, you know, out there in this new dispensation.
Yeah, you know, the type of work that we've been doing in Coffee 250 is really going into the communities, as the sisters have said, and trying to get people to work among themselves and to create conditions and opportunities for them. And one of the difficulties we've had is the level of fear that is in the African-Guyanese community. And one of the triumphs of this election result is that I think it has washed away that fear that was really gripping the society. And so it allows us, I think, more opportunities now to do the kind of work in organizing black people so that they can begin to take their rightful place. We're not the type of organization that believes that a government must come in and do it for you. What we believe government should do is to facilitate the kind of work that we do, and you know, and that is why we worked to bring about this unity government, because we feel it is a type of government that can facilitate the kind of work we do. But ultimately, the work we will do will have to be among the people themselves, and the people themselves have to want that kind of work. And you know, just as a thing, I mean, you know, symbols are important, small tokens are important. One lady ran behind me yesterday about 20 yards, and she said, Dr. Hinds, you know, I've spoken to you a couple times on Facebook, and I want to talk to you now. I want to join Coffee 250. I'm ready to join Coffee 250. All right? How can I do? I said, you know, send me, give me your number on Facebook, and I will tell you how you can join Coffee 250. Now that's one person, right? But I think it's significant that she says, I am ready to join Coffee 250. The euphoria that is out there has to be channeled into positive areas and positive direction. I think Sister Joan is emphasizing that, and that's part of what we're we're doing in Coffee 250. Is to say that, look, there are resources in your communities that you can use. One of our model communities is Stanleytown on the West Bank. Here is a community that last year organized a 2-week emancipation camp where they brought 50 children together for 2 weeks and get them there to sit down and to learn about African identity, African history, African personalities together. So successful for two weeks. And then immediately after that, they organize a lesson center where kids, there are 40 to 50 kids, 2 times a week can go to the center and get help with their lessons. And they've been doing that for the last year. Now, we would like that to spread to other communities. Alright? Now, it has been slow work, it has been gradual work, but I think now with this euphoria, we can then go to the communities and say, you no longer have anybody to blame. You can't say you frighten the PPP anymore, and so on and so forth. Now, here's the kind of work we've come for us to do. We want to have creative circles where your young people can be nourished, those who can sing and can dance and can act and so forth, can find a place to go in the evenings where they can form culture groups, drama groups, where you express yourself creatively, but you make money off of doing that.
Well, I'm glad David brought this up, because I feel that this is going to be the creative people in this society will benefit greatly from this new dispensation, because before, I don't think that the previous administration placed any value on creative ability.
Certainly not African creativity.
Not African creativity. And this society is just burgeoning with creative energy. You know, I mean, I, as a creative person myself, I looked at what happened with that celebration of the victory, and I have been writing my
look what they do with that,
with the
clothes,
everything.
It was just amazing.
It's just
the flag, everything. It was just amazing.
It's and that's so much energy that we have got to you know, we've got
cultivate
to
and
channel that energy.
So we just want to tell the communities that we are
and
just going to continue to do the work that we've been doing, that we will still come into the communities and help you to organize. The government is not going to change educational standards in our communities overnight. We have confidence that they will lay the groundwork, but while we are waiting for the big institutional change to take place, we can bring immediate relief to our children in their communities. So we want to create more Stanleytowns in the communities where we deal with the education of our children. We deal with the question of our young people, our people in the community knowing the law. Knowing what are your rights, you know? What are your legal rights? What are your constitutional rights? So those are some of the things we're doing. Knowing your identity, who you are, knowing that you come from a beautiful culture and so forth. That kind of work that we want to do. And there are people in the communities who want to do entrepreneurial work and so on and so forth. And we can help to facilitate the kind of education that one needs around that kind of thing and so forth. So we are excited.
To this end, and I'm glad we're talking about this. Yeah. I have been trying for the longest while to get, well, not for the longest while, but quite a little while, to get Coffee 250 to establish a creative development unit, you know, a specific unit that goes and does exactly what you talked about just now, David. Goes into the community and garners all the creative talent down there that's just waiting to get our children to express themselves. And that we will, and I'm saying this, David, that you as an academic must be the one who informs you, people like you. You must inform this process. You know, I would like to see us leave the idea of lectures, you know, a little bit, you know, put that aside a little bit, and do it, and let the creative folk. In other words, what we're shaping here, I think, is a bloodless revolution in the 21st century.
Oh, that's a good. And what is the role of one word to young people as we close in that bloodless revolution? What one word to young people? A closing remark.
I would say organize yourself. as Dr. Hinds and my sister was hinting at before. I think you should organize yourselves, and when we come into the community, let's get some work done.
Get work done.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our show for tonight. Of course, this has been African Drums, a presentation of the Coffee 250 Committee. Tonight, discussing African Guyanese and the 2015 election, a bloodless revolution. We promised you last Sunday that we were going to be celebrating tonight, and we were celebrating, and we will continue to celebrate, but we get to work tomorrow morning, as His Excellency President David Granger has said, that the work starts bright and early at 8 a.m. in the morning. So I hope you've enjoyed this program. Please keep tuned to activities of the Coffee 250 Committee. Check the Facebook group, Coffee 250 on Facebook, and check us out on YouTube, Coffee 250, and continue to check in with us, any of the persons that you see here, any other persons associated with Coffee 250 Committee, on our activities in your community. This has been African Drums. I've been filling in for LC Harry. Good night, and congratulations to you on winning a bloodless revolution.
The members of the Coffee 250 Committee congratulate the APNU-AFC on winning the confidence and vote of the Guyanese people in the May 11, 2015 ballot. We congratulate President David Granger and Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu as they take up the mantle of leadership of our nation, and remind them of their promises to those who have entrusted them with moving this country out of the dark days of division and marginalization onto its original promise of equality, justice, security, and opportunity for all, regardless of their cultural heritage, religious belief, race, ethnicity, sex, social class, or sexual orientation. We envision a Guyana where all citizens enjoy equal justice before the law, human rights, and security, equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunity, particularly in land ownership, education, employment, and healthcare, security, and justice. For us, the Guyanese nation must, in letter and spirit, through its national institutions and ethos, reflect the will and aspiration of all of its peoples. We believe that a Guyana premised on and grounded in equality, jointness, inclusiveness, and mutual respect will allow for the flowering of our collective abilities and talents in the service of national development and our independence objective of one people, one nation, and one destiny. In our multi-ethnic society, ethnic unity and solidarity is indispensable and must be. Further,